Carol Wisely here again with Radio Free Decipher, Friday morning, and it's a Dominion week. So today I'm going to be talking primarily about Star Trek. We've had 2 release weeks in a row now, so lots of energy surrounding that game. And I'm lucky enough to have got Tim Ellington back here to talk, and also somebody new to Radio Free Decipher, although definitely not new to Decipher, and that's Sandy Wible. Sandy, who first came to the company as Rebel Base Leader. Sandy, when did you start?
Oh, I don't know. That was fall '95, I believe.
Long time ago.
Yep.
About the same time that I came here then.
Yeah.
How long were you Rebel Base Leader?
About 1.5 years, I believe. Yeah, but before that I was doing volunteer work on the internet for a long time. I was originally on Genie, and we had a little bit of presence on Genie, and then I was on the Usenet doing things on the internet. And then when the position came open here at Decipher, it was just natural for me to move down here.
I dream of Genie.
Mm-hmm.
What's Genie? Because I don't know about Genie.
Genie was an online service. It was fairly small. It kind of, hung around for a little while, never really went anywhere, and then it was sold. And I think it's still out there, but there's not a lot going on there as far as gaming goes.
Oh, cool. So were you a CCG player since the very beginning?
Oh, yeah. Star Trek I started about a month after its initial release. That would have been fall '94. And I've been a Magic player for a long time, and, most of us play a lot of CCGs, so...
Can I ask you about another game, Sandy?
Sure.
Tell people about the game your favorite game, and the game that you're sort of world known at.
Oh, that's probably Diplomacy.
Uh-huh.
I'm actually a 2-time world champion at Diplomacy, and Diplomacy is a board game. It's based around negotiation. The rules for it are fairly simple, actually, and it's all 7 players get down together and just wheel and deal and make deals. So that's what it's all about.
Well, all of you probably don't know, but I used to play Diplomacy when it very first came out. I was a student at the time, so anybody who knows... Well, this is when it first came out in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a few years later than the US, but I'm not going to tell anybody when that was. Far too long ago. But I have had the pleasure of playing Sandy at Diplomacy once, but I think we lost. The group that I was in alliance with, I'm pretty sure that we lost. It was the Estrogen Alliance. It was a bunch of girls. So anyway, I'm glad to welcome Sandy to Radio Free Decipher. He now works in PD. How long have you been in PD, Sandy?
A little bit more than a year.
Just over a year?
Yeah.
Great. And you work on both games, or are you specifically Star Trek or Star Wars?
Well, lately I've been doing a lot of design for Star Trek. I still do a little bit of design for Wars, mostly feedback, that kind of thing. I also am in charge of proofing for both games, so I do a lot, sheet layout, that kind of thing.
So you have a big eye for detail.
Hopefully, anyway.
Guys, you know who to complain to. Well, I've got Tim and Sandy here today because I wanted to talk a little bit about background of Dominion. We've got no big news for anybody on Radio Free today. We announced a lot of stuff last week, and we're hoping in the weeks to come we can announce a lot more new stuff, but today is very much a background program. We're going to talk a little bit about the background to some of the cards, or particularly one card I've heard about in Dominion, because I get a lot of requests from people who like to hear how the cards arrive the way they are. So, guys, I'm going to hand over to you, and tell me, which card are you talking about?
We'll be talking about the Ketracel White development some today, and that was one of the cards that we spent a lot of development time on to try to get the right feel, because it's a good thematic card for the Dominion affiliation. Everybody knows about the Jim Hadar's addiction to the Ketracel White, and so we're going to try to go through some of the steps in the evolution of that card in the new set.
Good. Well, sometimes we have non-Star Trek players listening, the Star Wars guys do, so can you just explain a little bit more about what Ketracel White means, just to those few people who don't watch the show?
Okay, well, the Jim Hadar, which are the soldiers of the Dominion, they're genetically bred by the founders. In order to keep the Jim Hadar's allegiance to the founders, they make them chemically addicted to Ketracel White. If they don't have the white, as they call it, then they go through withdrawals, they go on killing sprees, and eventually they'll kill themselves. And so the founders, through the Vorta, ration out the to the Jem'Hadar, the Ketracel White, to keep them loyal. They have to, meet expectations in order to receive their supply of Ketracel White.
So it's a chemical substance?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Okay, guys, well, over to you. Let's talk about how that card came to be.
Well, it's kind of interesting. All cards, some more than others, kind of go through these iterations. We bounce back and forth trying to balance the story and the gameplay. Ketracel White was a tough one to start with because we had these huge story constraints, and we really wanted to nail that gameplay because that's kind of the heart of the Dominion. When we started out, as happens with a lot of cards, originally Ketracel White had a lot of text jammed into it. And what we do is we just cram that in there and then we play test it and then weed some of it out. Originally, we had it immune to disruptor overload. We didn't want somebody with that disruptor overload interrupt to just blow it up and cause their opponent's Jem'Hadar to just go berserk.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about the design work. Sometimes our gameplay elements don't quite coincide with the story that we see in the show. And while you wouldn't see someone throwing a overloaded phaser into a big, vat of Ketracel White to get rid of it in the story, that certainly is a gameplay element. But we needed to make it vulnerable to some of the gameplay elements, and so that's part of where the struggle for us early on came in, was how do we marry the story that we see in the show of them getting it rationed out, them getting it in small doses, the Vorta giving it out, against some of the gameplay elements we have of it being an equipment card and how it moves and how it reports and all those things. So we tried really hard to get as much story detail in as possible, with the understanding that there are certain game strategies and certain cards you can use that can make that vulnerable.
Right, so what we did there is we moved that functionality to one of the Jem'Hadar, and he can, if you've got him, he can protect your Ketracel White. And that way, if your opponent has the card, it's still useful. He can slow you down a little bit, maybe make you go back and get that Jem'Hadar to protect him. If you know your opponent has disruptor overloads in his deck, then you have to go back and get that guy in order to protect your white. Something else that we had as we went through this development was the interplay with the facility cards. And originally we had a Dominion outpost, and that didn't make it into the final set. We may still make it in the future. The Dominion outpost had a special download of Ketracel White, and the supply depot, it's interesting, actually split into two separate cards. In the final set we have a remote supply depot and a primary supply depot. And originally the supply depot was way too powerful because it let you seed as well as play for free your Ketracel White as well as other equipment cards. And that was just way too strong, as we found our playtesting. So we split that out into two cards, weakened it up a little bit, and I think we achieved a pretty good balance with that in the final result.
Yeah, so far that's it's panned out pretty well. What we were finding when Sandy says that was a little overpowerful, we found that in playtesting we could seed lots of Ketracel White and lots of Jem'Hadar guns, and made it really tough on the opponent because the Dominion player always seemed to have an advantage. But one of the things that we have in the game, again, is the balance between story and gameplay. For instance, some gameplay is more representative. We have situations where an engineer can build an outpost in a turn, whereas the Ketracel White is more of a detail level. It's more of an individual card or personnel level function. So we wanted to try to capture that as much as possible, but at the same time we wanted to make it fun gameplay and not just pure story.
Now, do you ever have disagreements when you're developing these cards?
Oh no, never. That's where Sandy's diplomacy background comes in real handy.
There you go.
Because he and Bill can form an alliance and make me change my mind, or he and I'll gang up on Bill sometimes. But yeah, we do have disagreements in the development process. Sometimes one of us will take more of a story approach, and sometimes one of us will take more of a gameplay approach.
That's a huge compromise, I guess.
Off and on. A lot of times we do end up with that compromise. And hopefully going through that process, we end up with a lot of different angles. Somebody might come to it and say, well, this doesn't make sense with the story, and the person who designed that card might say, well, this was the gameplay I really wanted. I really wanted to have this effect on the game, to provide this functionality to the players. So when we go through that debate, we hopefully end up with a final product which is, gets the best of both worlds and brings all aspects to the game.
Now, are there any cards in Dominion that didn't make the final cut that you really wanted to see there? Any favorites that ended up on the cutting room floor?
That's hard to say. We always have a lot more cards than we can fit in. It's really tough deciding what goes in, what doesn't. We could really jam-pack the sets with all kinds of really cool cards, but it's tough. You can't have an army full of generals, that kind of thing. You have to have your medium personnel, other things. You need to have the cards to make affiliations go. In other words, the game won't play correctly. So what we do is we don't kill cards. We just push them off to the next set, the next product, and we look at them again, bring them back in, and we just keep them and kind of keep a rolling over file with all of our ideas.
Yeah, especially in this case where the Dominion originally started out as both the Dominion and the Battle set. A lot of the cards that may have ended up on the cutting room floor, as you described, actually we designated and said, okay, well, we'll just roll this over to the next set. So in this case, probably more than any other set I've worked on, we already had a place for the cards that weren't making it. So as we were cutting them out, we already knew we were going to put them in the next set coming out.
So we're going to see them in Blaze of Glory, some of these?
Hopefully, yes.
Well, I'm looking forward to that set. I saw some of the development work on the flow pack the other day when I was in the art department, and it looked fabulous, so I'm really, really looking forward to that. And what's your favorite Star Trek card, Tim, of all time?
Ooh, my favorite card of all time. Well, I'm a big Klingon fan, and so I'd probably say it's probably Worf. Or the different, we have a couple of different versions of Worf now. Governor Worf. Worf is a Klingon in one of our preview cards. So, Worf is always a guy who's had to try to take the high road, always a little bit out of place. But I think he's probably one of my favorite characters and my favorite card.
What about you, Sandy?
That's always tough, too. I think a lot of us tend to have a natural bias towards the cards that we design. And as we go along, your current favorite changes all the time. Probably the one right now would be the Secret Mission card from the Dominion, and that's a really evil card. You can really put your opponent through the ringer with that one.
Well, this will be the first weekend of Dominion tournaments, so or Dominion hitting the tournament scene. So I guess you guys are going to be looking out for feedback next week. Do you think that people will have had a chance to assimilate it into their decks?
Oh, I think so. From what I've seen, some of the posts on the bulletin boards and the discussion lists, a lot of people were able to get product this week. So I think you'll see a lot of people experimenting with Dominion cards in their decks. I expect to see a couple of Dominion decks, popping up pretty quickly, and it'll be interesting to see how the affiliation stands in compared to some of the others, and also how some of the other things like the dilemmas and events and objectives that we made, fit into existing deck structures.
Well, I've heard a lot of people are going to use Kirk because they think that that's a really powerful card.
He is, and we wanted him to be. For the Star Trek universe as a whole, Kirk is probably the best known single personality in Star Trek, and so he deserved to have that balance in his card.
Well, that's one of my favorites. That one and Spot, those are my two favorite cards so far. So good. Well, thanks, guys. You got to get back to Blaze of Glory, I guess, which we think we know will be out later in the year. We're not quite sure when yet, but I'm here in April, May when I talk to people at the moment. So I guess you guys are in the thick of that. Have you had any play tests yet?
We've had them ongoing. We've got remote groups across the country, and every week we send them revisions, they test them, put them through the ringer, and we get feedback continually. We're a big company on email, so every day we have email, we incorporate the feedback, talk it over, as well as keep working on finalizing all the cards.
Good. Well, it's too early for a sneak peek. Now, Kendrick just walked past and handed me a note over my shoulder. He says, ask about 1001 and computer crash, or 1001 and computer crash.
I'm not quite sure what he's asking there, but probably asking how it balances computer crash. Lately in tournaments, as we saw in the World Championships last winter, a lot of people are playing with 10-plus computer crash cards in their deck. And we did see the possibility for that strategy. We did have plans to eventually put out a card to rein that in for the people who really didn't like their opponent doing that to them. So 1001 is one way to do that. Probably the best way is to stock them in your deck, maybe a couple of them. That's up to the player. And he'll just totally protect you from that.
Well, good. Thanks. And thanks, Kendrick, for that little note. Okay, well, thanks, guys. It's been nice talking to you. I think next week I'm going to be interviewing Mike Reynolds, who is a new member of the product development department. So look forward to that next week. And maybe, who knows, we might have some news about Episode 1. Tune in again next Friday.
Well, I'll be listening for news on Episode 1.
Yeah. Thanks, Carol.
Thanks, guys.